Marcus Carter was no stranger to adversity. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood in Chicago, his world was shaped by vibrant street murals, bustling sidewalks, and the rhythmic hum of the city. From a young age, Marcus had a knack for seeing beauty where others saw chaos. His ability to translate these observations into striking visual art set him apart. Yet, talent alone wasn't enough to open doors in the elite art world. Despite his passion, Marcus found himself working long hours at a local cafe to make ends meet, using his spare time to sketch, paint, and dream of a brighter future. His small apartment served as both a makeshift studio and a gallery, with canvases propped against every wall. Each piece told a story of struggle, resilience, and hope. Friends and neighbors marveled at his talent, but in the cutthroat world of high art, Marcus's work was invisible. One rainy afternoon, while scrolling through social media, Marcus stumbled upon an advertisement for an upcoming exhibition at the Sterling Gallery. Known for showcasing works by renowned artists, the gallery was a beacon of prestige. The event promised a chance for emerging talent to present their portfolios to Mr. Sterling himself, a man infamous for his sharp critiques and elitist attitude. Marcus hesitated. He knew his chances were slim. The Sterling Gallery had a reputation for favoring artists with connections, pedigree, or substantial backing, none of which Marcus had. But deep down, he also believed in his art. After all, wasn't art supposed to transcend barriers? Encouraged by his best friend, Jasmine, Marcus spent days preparing his portfolio. Each piece he selected was a labor of love, designed to showcase his unique perspective. "This is your shot, Marcus," Jasmine reminded him. "You've got to show them who you are." The day of the portfolio review arrived. Dressed in his best, a well-worn suit he'd borrowed from his father, Marcus entered the Sterling Gallery. The opulence of the space was overwhelming. Gilded frames lined the walls, showcasing abstract pieces with price tags that could cover a year's rent. The attendees were just as polished, sipping champagne and discussing art in hushed tones. When Marcus finally reached Mr. Sterling's table, his heart raced. The gallery owner was an older man with a sharp suit and an air of condescension. As Marcus introduced himself and presented his portfolio, he couldn't ignore the way Sterling's eyes skimmed over him, more interested in his appearance than his work. Sterling flipped through the portfolio with an air of disinterest. "What's this?" he asked, holding up a piece that depicted a young boy sitting under a tree, surrounded by a swirling storm of colors. "This isn't what we're looking for. Too raw. Unpolished. It doesn't fit the caliber of artists we feature here." Marcus swallowed hard, forcing himself to remain calm. "I believe it tells a powerful story," he replied. "It's about finding peace amidst chaos." Sterling scoffed. "Story? Art isn't just about storytelling, it's about presentation. Aesthetic. And frankly," he said, closing the portfolio with a snap, "this isn't it." Humiliation washed over Marcus. He tried to defend his work, but Sterling cut him off with a dismissive wave. "I suggest you find a smaller gallery that caters to unconventional tastes," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. The rejection stung. As Marcus walked out of the gallery, he felt the weight of every doubt and insecurity he'd ever carried. But beneath the pain was a spark of determination. He'd heard of stories like this before, of underdogs rising to the top despite the odds. If Sterling couldn't see the value in his art, Marcus would make sure the world did. That night, Marcus returned to his apartment and began painting with renewed vigor. Every brushstroke was fueled by the fire of rejection, turning pain into purpose. While Sterling had dismissed his work as unpolished, Marcus knew its worth. All he needed was the right opportunity to prove it. The sting of rejection lingered with Marcus for days, but instead of allowing it to consume him, he transformed it into a catalyst. Each night after work, he threw himself into his art, creating with a sense of urgency and passion he'd never felt before. His once modest collection grew into a vibrant, sprawling body of work that spilled out of his tiny apartment and onto the streets of his neighborhood. Jasmine, ever his cheerleader, saw the change in him immediately. "This is different, Marcus," she said one evening as she helped him organize his latest pieces. "You've always been talented, but now? You're unstoppable." Her encouragement pushed him further, but it was still a struggle to break into the mainstream. Marcus had no connections in the art world, no wealthy patrons to champion his cause. What he did have was a growing community of supporters who believed in him, even if they didn't have the resources to help him reach the next level. One afternoon, Jasmine made a suggestion. "Why don't you start sharing your work online?" she asked, scrolling through her phone. "There are tons of artists going viral on social media. You just need the right audience." Marcus hesitated. He'd always preferred the intimacy of face-to-face interaction, the immediate reactions of people standing in front of his work. But as he thought about it, he realized Jasmine had a point. The internet could offer him the visibility he so desperately needed. With her help, Marcus set up an account on a popular social media platform. They carefully photographed each piece, ensuring the lighting and angles did his work justice. His first post was simple, an image of his painting titled "Harmony in Chaos," accompanied by a heartfelt caption explaining the inspiration behind it. "At my lowest, I found solace in creating. This piece represents finding peace amidst the storm, a reflection of my own journey." To his surprise, the post gained traction almost immediately. Comments poured in, praising his talent and the emotional depth of his work. One user wrote, "This is what art should be, raw, honest, and impactful." Another commented, "I need this hanging in my living room. Do you sell prints?" Encouraged by the response, Marcus continued posting regularly, sharing not just his art but also the stories behind each piece. His authenticity resonated with people, and within weeks, his follower count had skyrocketed. But the real turning point came when an influential art blogger, Sofia Marquez, stumbled upon his profile. Sofia was known for discovering hidden talent and had a devoted following of collectors, gallery owners, and enthusiasts who trusted her taste implicitly. One evening, as Marcus was sketching a new concept, his phone buzzed relentlessly. Jasmine burst into his apartment, practically vibrating with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she shouted, shoving her phone in his face. On the screen was a tweet from Sofia Marquez. "Discovered the most incredible artist today. His work is raw, evocative, and unforgettable. Everyone needs to see this. At Marcus Carter Art." The post included images of Marcus's work, and within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. Messages flooded his inbox from people wanting to purchase his art or collaborate with him. Collectors began bidding on his pieces, offering sums that Marcus had only dreamed of. One message stood out among the rest, a representative from the prestigious Lamberton Gallery, known for launching the careers of some of the world's most celebrated artists. They invited Marcus to participate in their upcoming showcase, an event that attracted art lovers and critics from across the globe. As the reality of his situation sank in, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and disbelief. Just weeks ago, he'd been dismissed as unpolished and unworthy. Now, the same world that had rejected him was beginning to recognize his brilliance. That night, Marcus stood in front of his easel, staring at a blank canvas. For the first time in his life, he felt not just hopeful, but powerful. He was no longer creating out of desperation or fear of obscurity. He was creating because he had a voice, and the world was finally ready to listen. The Lamberton Gallery showcase marked a transformative moment for Marcus. On the night of the event, he stood outside the gallery, nerves buzzing in his chest as he gazed at the line of guests filing into the grand venue. Collectors, critics, and influencers mingled under the glowing chandeliers, discussing the pieces on display. It felt surreal. Just weeks ago, Marcus had been mocked and dismissed. Now, his name was listed alongside renowned artists. His section of the gallery was curated with precision, featuring his most striking works. At the center was his newest masterpiece, Resilience, a towering canvas alive with bold strokes and vivid hues that told the story of his journey from rejection to recognition. The piece had been crafted with the intention of making a statement, and it did exactly that. As Marcus roamed the gallery, he overheard murmurs of admiration. Guests marveled at the raw emotion in his work, the way it seemed to speak directly to their souls. "It's like he's captured the human condition," one man said, staring at resilience with tears in his eyes. Another guest whispered, "He's exactly what the art world needs, fresh, authentic, and unafraid." The highlight of the evening came when Sofia Marquez herself approached Marcus. Dressed impeccably, she extended a hand with a warm smile. "Marcus, I've been dying to meet you," she said. "Your work is extraordinary. It's no surprise the world is taking notice." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of applause. The gallery director had taken to the stage to announce the night's star artists, and Marcus was among them. As his name was called, a spotlight illuminated him, and the room erupted in cheers. For a moment, he stood frozen, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Jasmine, standing in the crowd, gave him a thumbs up, her face glowing with pride. The weeks following the showcase were a whirlwind. Marcus's social media presence exploded, with major art publications and blogs covering his story. Collectors clamored to buy his pieces, and bidding wars drove prices higher than Marcus had ever imagined. His inbox was flooded with invitations to collaborate, commission requests, and inquiries from galleries around the world. One of the most surprising moments came when he was approached by a prestigious auction house. They wanted to feature resilience as the centerpiece of an upcoming auction, predicting it would fetch a record-breaking sum for a first-time artist. Marcus agreed, and when the day of the auction arrived, the piece sold for $2.8 million, an unimaginable figure for a young artist from humble beginnings. Despite his newfound fame, Marcus remained grounded. He continued to create with the same passion and authenticity that had brought him this far. What mattered most to him wasn't the money or the accolades, but the connections his art forged with people. Messages poured in from fans who felt seen, inspired, or healed by his work. As his reputation grew, Marcus began receiving offers from galleries that had once overlooked him, including the Sterling Gallery. When he saw Mr. Sterling's name in his inbox, he couldn't help but laugh. The man who had mocked and dismissed him now wanted to showcase his work. But Marcus wasn't interested in proving anything to Sterling, at least, not yet. He had bigger plans that would ensure his story wasn't just one of success, but one of justice and transformation. "Would you like me to continue with part 4, The Big Revelation?" Months after his meteoric rise, Marcus found himself in a position he never thought possible, financially secure, creatively liberated, and celebrated in the art world. Yet, a part of him couldn't forget the sting of rejection from Mr. Sterling and the Sterling Gallery. Not because he wanted revenge, but because it symbolized the barriers he and so many others had faced. One day, while scrolling through news articles, Marcus stumbled upon an intriguing headline. "Sterling Gallery struggles amidst declining interest." The article described how the once prestigious Sterling Gallery was failing to attract new clientele. Its outdated business practices, narrow artistic focus, and refusal to adapt to changing tastes had left it lagging behind in a rapidly evolving art world. Even the gallery's most loyal patrons were turning to newer, more inclusive venues. Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic irony. The gallery that had dismissed his work as unpolished was now struggling to stay relevant in an art scene that increasingly valued authenticity and diversity, qualities Marcus had championed from the start. Fueled by curiosity, Marcus decided to visit the gallery. Dressed in a sharp suit that reflected his newfound success, he entered the familiar space with an air of quiet confidence. The interior looked the same, elegant, pristine, and slightly cold. Yet, the energy was different. The crowds were sparse, and the conversations lacked the vibrancy he had once envied. Marcus approached the front desk, where an assistant greeted him politely, clearly unaware of who he was. "How can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here to speak with Mr. Sterling," Marcus replied. The assistant hesitated, glancing at his expensive attire and confident demeanor. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Marcus said with a slight smile, "but I think he'll want to see me." After a brief exchange, Marcus was escorted to Mr. Sterling's office. The man who had once dismissed him now sat behind a desk that seemed too large for his diminished presence. His suit was still impeccable, but his demeanor lacked the arrogance Marcus remembered. "Mr. Carter," Sterling said, rising to shake his hand. "What an unexpected surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Marcus took a seat, studying the man who had once looked at him with disdain. "I've been following the gallery's journey," he said casually. "It seems like times have been tough." Sterling forced a chuckle. "The art world is always shifting. It's a challenge to keep up." Marcus leaned forward, his tone calm but pointed. "It's not just about keeping up. It's about recognizing talent when it's right in front of you. Something you failed to do not too long ago." Sterling's expression faltered. Recognition dawned on him as he connected the dots. "You're—" "Yes," Marcus said, cutting him off. "I'm the unpolished artist you dismissed. The one who wasn't caliber enough for your gallery." Sterling's face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and regret. "Mr. Carter, Marcus held up a hand. "Save it. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here to make an offer." Sterling's eyes widened. "An offer?" Marcus leaned back, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'd like to buy the gallery." The room fell silent. Sterling stared at him, his usual composure shattered. "You can't be serious," he finally said. "Oh, I'm very serious," Marcus replied. "This gallery has potential, but it needs a new vision, one that embraces diversity, innovation, and authenticity. Under my leadership, it could become a space where artists like me don't have to fight to be seen." Sterling's resistance was evident, but the reality of his financial situation was undeniable. The gallery was bleeding money, and Marcus's offer was generous. After a tense negotiation, Sterling reluctantly agreed to sell. When the deal was finalized, Marcus stood in the gallery's main hall, taking in the space that was now his. It felt surreal, yet deeply satisfying. The very walls that had once excluded him would now showcase artists who had been overlooked, underestimated, and undervalued. As he left the gallery that day, Marcus couldn't help but smile. This wasn't just a victory for him, it was the beginning of a revolution in the art world. The news of Marcus Carter purchasing the Sterling Gallery spread like wildfire through the art world. Critics, artists, and collectors alike were stunned. The once dismissed artist, who had been rejected by the gallery's owner, now stood as its new owner, poised to reshape the very institution that had turned him away. Media outlets covered the story from every angle, and the reaction was a mix of shock, admiration, and curiosity. The first major event at the rebranded gallery was set to be a night of reckoning. Marcus knew this was his moment to show the world not just his vision, but his transformation, from the struggling artist to the visionary gallery owner. He wanted this night to symbolize a new era for the gallery, one that would welcome diversity, authenticity, and the stories of artists who, like him, had once been overlooked. The invitation list was carefully curated. Gone were the days of exclusive, elitist guest lists. Marcus invited artists from all backgrounds, including those whose work he'd discovered in the years following his rise to fame. He wanted the event to be a celebration of new ideas and fresh perspectives, and he knew it had to be a bold statement. The night arrived. The Sterling Gallery, now under Marcus's leadership, had undergone a transformation. The walls were lined with stunning, diverse works of art, pieces that told the stories of different cultures, struggles, and triumphs. The atmosphere was lively, electric with a sense of possibility. The crowd was a mixture of old patrons and new faces, artists, influencers, art collectors, and even a few curious former critics who had come to see if Marcus's vision was truly revolutionary. When the doors opened, Marcus walked in with the same calm confidence that had gotten him to this point. His eyes scanned the room as people greeted him, some with admiration, others with skepticism. But there, in the center of the room, stood Mr. Sterling, awkwardly sipping champagne, trying to blend into the crowd but unmistakably out of place in this new world Marcus had created. The moment was poignant, almost cinematic. Marcus made his way through the crowd, ignoring the familiar faces that had once belittled him. His gaze locked on Sterling, who now seemed small, a relic of an old system that had been replaced by a more inclusive, forward-thinking approach. As he approached Sterling, the room seemed to hold its breath. The former gallery owner looked up, a faint recognition in his eyes. "Marcus," Sterling began, forcing a smile. "It's impressive what you've done with the space. Quite a transformation." Marcus tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. "It's more than just a transformation, Sterling. It's a movement." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You didn't just reject me, you rejected all the voices that were never heard in this world, voices that are finally being given a chance." Sterling's face flushed, and for a moment, he seemed to lose his composure. "I didn't know," he murmured, the arrogance that had once defined him now replaced by a flicker of regret. Marcus's expression softened, but there was no mistaking the power in his words. "You didn't want to know. But now, you have no choice but to see." With that, Marcus turned and walked away, leaving Sterling standing amidst the crowd, his face a mixture of humiliation and realization. The gallery buzzed with excitement, but for Sterling, the truth was clear. The world had moved on, and he had been left behind. As the night unfolded, Marcus stood at the center of the crowd, watching the people who had once rejected him now marvel at his success. The once dismissed artist had become the one in control, the one shaping the future of art. The event was a triumph not just for Marcus, but for all the artists whose stories had been silenced for too long. Under Marcus's leadership, the gallery was no longer just a place to display art. It was a space where artists from all walks of life could be seen, celebrated, and empowered. But the real poetic justice came when the evening's auction began. Marcus had decided to auction off his most famous work, Resilience, as the star piece of the event. As the bids climbed higher and higher, Sterling, who had once devalued Marcus's art, watched in disbelief as the final bid reached an astounding $5 million. The moment was symbolic. Marcus's journey, from the rejected artist to the celebrated owner, had come full circle. And the gallery that had once been a symbol of elitism and exclusion was now a beacon of hope, showcasing the power of diversity and the importance of embracing art in all its forms. As the night drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how far he had come. The battle for recognition had been tough, but in the end, it was his authenticity, his resilience, and his refusal to let anyone define his worth that had led him to this point. The story of Marcus Carter, the artist who had been mocked and underestimated, was now a legend in the art world. And Sterling? He would forever be a footnote in Marcus's journey, a reminder of what happens when you fail to recognize true talent and the power of perseverance. The Sterling Gallery, now rebranded under Marcus Carter's ownership, had become a sanctuary for artists from all walks of life. What was once an exclusive space for a select few had evolved into a bustling hub of creative energy, where underrepresented artists found their voices and where the walls no longer whispered only to the elite. Instead, they now spoke to the world. Marcus had made it his mission to create an environment where art was no longer confined by race, gender, or socioeconomic status. His goal was simple yet profound, to celebrate the diversity of human expression, to uplift those who had once been ignored, and to foster an inclusive community where every artist had a seat at the table. In the months following the dramatic shift in the gallery's focus, artists from all corners of the world reached out, eager to showcase their work in the newly revitalized space. Marcus had opened the doors to those who had once been rejected, those who felt their work was too unconventional, too raw, or too unpolished. In doing so, he had created a new standard for what art could be, and what it could represent. Under Marcus's guidance, the gallery hosted exhibitions that celebrated different cultures, backgrounds, and artistic traditions. It wasn't just about the art itself, but the stories behind it. The works on display told the narratives of people who had been marginalized, whose voices had long been stifled by the gatekeepers of the art world. One of the most impactful exhibitions was called Voices of the Unheard, a collection of works by artists from impoverished communities, whose stories were often overlooked in favor of more marketable art. The exhibition showcased paintings, sculptures, and mixed media pieces that captured the struggles, joys, and resilience of people living on the margins of society. The opening night of Voices of the Unheard was a testament to the power of community. The gallery was packed with people from all walks of life, artists, collectors, activists, and even local families who had never considered stepping foot inside an art gallery before. For many of them, it was the first time they had seen art that truly reflected their experiences, their struggles, and their triumphs. Marcus walked through the crowd that evening, listening to the conversations, the discussions, the debates. People were talking about the art, really talking about it, and it was clear that something special was happening. There was a sense of connection, of unity, that transcended the usual art world pretensions. It wasn't just about price tags or prestige anymore. It was about understanding, empathy, and the power of art to change the world. As the night unfolded, Marcus found himself standing in front of one of his own pieces, The Awakening, a painting he had created in the early days of his rise to fame. It depicted a person breaking free from chains, rising above the chaos of the world around them. The piece had always been personal to Marcus, a reflection of his own journey toward freedom and self-expression. Standing there, watching the crowd, he realized how far he had come. The rejection he had faced, the humiliation, the doubts, all of it had led him to this moment. And now, he wasn't just an artist. He was a leader, someone who had the power to change the art world for the better. The following weeks saw even more transformative changes. Marcus introduced mentorship programs for young, aspiring artists, providing them with the resources and guidance they needed to navigate the often intimidating art world. He set up a scholarship fund to help students from underprivileged backgrounds pursue their artistic dreams, ensuring that the next generation of artists would have the opportunity to shine. But perhaps the most significant shift came in the gallery's approach to sales. Marcus had always believed that art should be accessible, not just a commodity for the wealthy. To that end, he implemented a pricing structure that made art more affordable for the average person. He introduced payment plans, sliding scale pricing, and even a rent-to-own option for pieces that were particularly expensive. The response was overwhelming. People who had never considered owning art before were now filling the gallery, eager to take a piece of history home with them. Some of the most prized works sold quickly, but the gallery was no longer about selling to the highest bidder. It was about making art a part of people's lives, art that could inspire, provoke thought, and spark conversation. In the months that followed, Marcus's influence in the art world grew exponentially. Critics who had once dismissed him as a flash in the pan now hailed him as a visionary, a leader who had revolutionized the industry. His name became synonymous with authenticity, diversity, and change. As he sat in his office late one night, reviewing the latest exhibition proposal, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on everything he had accomplished. The gallery had become more than just a business. It had become a movement. And as the doors to the Sterling Gallery remained open, Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. There was still so much more to do, so many more voices to amplify, so many more stories to tell. The transformation was complete, and the world of art would never be the same. The grand exhibition celebrating Marcus Carter's work and the transformation of the Sterling Gallery was the pinnacle of his journey, a culmination of everything he had fought for, worked for, and believed in. Invitations had been sent to the most influential figures in the art world, but the guest list was also filled with those who had inspired Marcus along the way, fellow artists, community leaders, activists, and the young talents he had mentored over the years. As the night of the event arrived, the gallery was buzzing with anticipation. The atmosphere was electric, filled with a sense of history in the making. Guests marveled at the expansive collection of work on display, a fusion of traditional, modern, and experimental styles. The walls of the gallery were no longer just decorated with art, they told a story of resilience, diversity, and the power of art to break barriers. Marcus stood at the center of it all, the focal point of the evening. It had been a long road to get here, and in many ways, it felt surreal. The once humbling art world had come full circle, with the very people who had dismissed him now standing in awe of his accomplishments. As he walked through the gallery, stopping to chat with collectors, artists, and critics, Marcus found himself reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. It had not been easy. There had been rejection, heartbreak, and times when he questioned whether it was all worth it. But now, standing in front of his paintings, surrounded by those who had believed in him from the start, it was clear that the struggles had been worth it. At the heart of the exhibition was a new collection of pieces Marcus had created over the past year. One of the paintings, Legacy, was a particularly personal piece. It depicted a tree with deep roots spreading through the earth, its branches reaching toward the sky. The tree was surrounded by figures, men, women, and children from various backgrounds, each one standing tall and proud, their faces lit with hope. It was Marcus's tribute to his journey, to the community that had supported him, and to the future of art he had worked so hard to build. The opening speech was given by none other than Sofia Marquez, the influential art blogger who had first helped him gain traction all those years ago. She stood on the stage, addressing the crowd, her voice strong and clear. "What we're witnessing tonight is not just an exhibition," she said. "It is a revolution. Marcus Carter has shown us that art is not just about technique or reputation, it's about the stories we tell, the voices we uplift, and the changes we can make when we dare to dream beyond the walls that try to hold us back." The applause that followed was thunderous, and Marcus, standing backstage, felt a surge of emotion. He had dreamed of moments like this, dreamed of making a difference, but now that he was living it, it felt even more powerful than he had ever imagined. Later that evening, amidst the flurry of congratulatory messages and interviews, Marcus found himself face to face with Mr. Sterling. The gallery owner, now much older and visibly humbled, had been invited to the event as a gesture of reconciliation. Though their relationship had started on a rocky note, Marcus had chosen to extend an olive branch. After all, Sterling had played a pivotal role in his story, albeit in a way neither of them had expected. Sterling extended his hand, and Marcus took it, offering a nod of recognition. There was no animosity, no bitterness. The past had shaped them both, but it was the future that mattered now. "I never thought I'd see the day," Sterling said quietly. "I didn't understand your art back then. But now, I see it. I see what you've built." Marcus smiled, his eyes steady with conviction. "It wasn't just me. It's the artists, the community, the people who believed in me. We built this together." As the evening drew to a close, Marcus found a quiet moment to himself. He stood in front of Legacy, his masterpiece, and reflected on how far he had come. It was a full-circle moment. The young man who had once been dismissed by the art world now stood at the helm of a movement that was reshaping it. He thought of Jasmine, his best friend, who had supported him through every step of his journey. He thought of the young artists who would now have opportunities he could only have dreamed of. He thought of the countless individuals who had been inspired by his work, who had found courage in the stories his art told. But most of all, he thought of the future of art, the future of voices that had been silenced for too long, and the future of the gallery he had built. Marcus Carter's legacy wasn't just in his art, it was in the doors he had opened for others, the barriers he had torn down, and the way he had changed the art world forever. As he left the gallery that night, he knew one thing for sure: his work wasn't done. There was still more to create, more to change, and more to give. And as long as there were stories to tell, there would always be a place for art to thrive.